controversial topic. So I went into spaces inside West Bengal that are not talked of. I got into the idea of writing a book on Bangladesh. Massive violence took place in Bangladesh on Hindus. I think the Bengali identity played a role there. There were too many people coming from the TMC into the period. You kill the anti-incumbency because then the voter is confused. So till yesterday he was your political rival. Tomorrow he's your boss. So you are confused, you are sometimes disappointed, angry. Suddenly just before elections, he's my boss, he's telling me what to do. He gets demoralized. There was this sense of BJP sweeping the state. That sense got a little too much. Just before election, confuse the voter, anger your cadre.
राम राम दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है अर्जुन सिंह and welcome to another episode of the Arjun Kadian show. Today I have with me a dear friend. I have the opportunity to know him for a fairly long time and his fans across India. Deep has, along with Avishek Biswas, has written a remarkable book which I've had the opportunity to attend a discussion and थोड़ा इसमें पढ़ के भी मैंने देखा and it's receiving warm reception. Reviews बहुत अच्छे हैं. And in fact, ये topic, I am personally glad कि इन topics पे conversation finally हो रही है. And I take it from a scenario pre-2014 इन मुद्दों पर या हिंदू civilization के topics के बारे में या फिर Hindus across the world के बारे में conversation होना बहुत दूर की बात थी. Imagine who would have imagined writing a book.
But like this, yeah.
I remember I was telling you, I was on a panel discussion a couple of years ago and everybody was talking about it. It was panelists who were discussing Hindu subjects and topics about Ayodhya. We were discussing how right-wing economy and all those things. And at some point, I got a little uncomfortable on the stage and realized, why are we not taking the name, which is perhaps the most important? That if it had not been for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's becoming Prime Minister in 2014, it would not have been possible to talk about these topics which have such important relevance, considering both from Hindu civilizational point of view and then of course historical point of view.
Yeah.
So one, of course, congratulations Deep, and then this deep dive into a conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Arjun.
And just how did this topic come by? Because you've written a couple of books already. In fact, let me just quickly read. So Deep is a journalist and an author, and he's headed newsrooms across Delhi, Mumbai, Bhopal, and Ahmedabad, and held top editorial positions in leading media outlets, including most recently as executive director with India Today. He's currently working as a contributing editor with The Print, and he's the author of best-selling book Blood Island and the Bengal 2021. This book has been co-authored with Avishek Biswas. He's an assistant professor in English literature at Vidyasagar College under Calcutta University, and he was awarded his doctoral degree from Jadavpur University for his thesis on the unheard voices of Namasudra partition survivors. So, Deep, why don't we begin with your book, Bengal 2021? That's the last one, right?
Yeah.
I think we were talking about how was the experience covering those stories on ground.
Experience was tough, Arjun. Firstly, because when I started traveling across West Bengal for the book, there was COVID. Mm-hmm. So I'd go into the villages and I'd wear masks and use sort of take a lot of precautions. But then my driver told me that आपको mask मत पहनना चाहिए. So I said, why? He said, when the villagers see you wearing masks, many of them are not in the habit of wearing masks, so they think that you are coming from the city with some disease. So I said, okay, sir, आप hand sanitize करते रहिए, but don't wear mask, because it immediately sort of makes them feel that there's a city dweller who's coming with a disease, unheard of disease into the villages. A lot of excitement. It was also anecdotal, like most of my books are. But there was this sense that the BJP will do very well in the elections. It did not do that well, and a lot of predictions went wrong. But it was a good experience to sort of to visit my home state, because I've been away for a very long time, and also follow the refugee trail, which was my first book, which was Bengal 2021, and also, of course, this book. So I went into spaces inside West Bengal that are not talked of in mainstream conversation often. But it was very interesting. I think it also set the tone for this book, because soon after Bengal 2021, I got into the idea of writing a book on Bangladesh. 2021 was also the year when massive violence took place in Bangladesh on Hindus.
Yes, absolutely.
The Durga Puja violence.
Which is why it's important. Even the Bengal, 2021, the election diary as well. Because, like you just said, there was a large wave, at least people who were, the observers and people who were delivering these, journalism from ground.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you saw BJP doing massive protests, the youth wing doing massive protests. And there was this wave, that जैसे election turnaround हो रहा है, BJP is going to make some, headway. But what happened? What was your observation on ground in Bengal then?
Controversial topic, but I think what happened was there was a, I don't know if I can put this to one factor. There were several factors. I think the Bengali identity played a role there. The whole sense of insider versus outsider. But also, I think one of the things the party got wrong was that there were too many people coming from the TMC into the BJP. Okay. So if there is anti-incumbency against TMC, and just before the elections, if there are too many TMC guys coming into your party, two things happen. One is, I think you kill the anti-incumbency, because then the voter is confused that who am I voting for? It's the same faces, right? It was in this party. They were in this party, now they're in this party. That is one. And the second, your people who have stayed with you for a very long time, your ground level workers, they get very demotivated. Because there were instances of, say, I'm just saying that, of one guy they were fighting against on the ground. So till yesterday, he was your political rival. Tomorrow he's your boss. So you are confused. You're sometimes disappointed, angry that, I was fighting him for past 5 years. Suddenly, just before elections, he's my boss. He's telling me what to do. So I think he gets demoralized. I think the voter gets confused. So
was there a larger sense that BJP is putting a very strong foot against?
There was a very strong sense of that they're coming in very strong. I mean, even the local media started reporting that. There was this sense of BJP sweeping the state. But I think somewhere that sense got a little too much, because, state to state, how voters react differs. India is a very complex country. So I think that I don't know how many people will agree with me now, but I think that may not have been the smartest thing to do. Just before election, confuse the voter, anger your cadre. Okay. So I thought that's one of the things.
The cadre put up a really strong show as an organizing.
Yes.
Anyway, so how did this topic come by? Of course, you just told us during your initial research and other books also, this topic was brewing up in your head. How did this topic come by?
So this topic has been with me for a very long time. It had been with me since I started going to this village home that we had for very long. It's only recently, like maybe 10 years ago, that we started selling it off bit by bit, which was our weekend home. So it was almost half a village in South 24 Parganas. So when I was growing up, it was great, because we had a city home, and then we would take the train or take the car to this village home, which was this massive bungalow, and there were rice fields and paddy fields and many coconut trees, ponds, etc., etc. So when I'd go back to school, not too many people had weekend homes like that. Okay, when I was growing up, there's this guy I used to see, my great-grandfather, but only in pictures. And there were these amazing stories about him of how in his time things were very different on the other side of the border. And my dad, who perhaps did not particularly like his grandfather, my great-grandfather, sorry, so who particularly did not like his grandfather, he would tell me things about his excesses, the servants and the way he would lord over men and land and all of that. And I used to wonder, wow, I mean, that was a time. Then I realized, of course, as I got older, I realized that there were a lot of Hindu zamindars in that side of the border, but what was once East Bengal and which later became East Pakistan and then is now Bangladesh today, who had to leave everything behind to come to this part of the world. And they became, from being landed gentry, almost overnight, they became homeless refugees. So, and my family was one of them.
Yes,
one
the
of such
refugee
people. Yes, the refugee
blood.
blood, as my friend Utpal Kumar from First Post put it in his review. But we were fortunate. We were relatively fortunate because since my great grandfather was a man of means, he could sort of transfer money from this side to that side, and they could build this property. And I grew up in relative privilege. But my co-author, Abhishek Biswas, his family lost literally everything. So when they came to West Bengal, they came penniless, and he actually suffered the refugee experience, of having a home which is next to an open drain, where families stay very cramped, and the family is really, really wants to sort of, somehow make a living and send the kids to school. So he grew up in that kind of poverty, and then he made a career for himself. He then later became a professor and did his PhD, and then wrote this book with me. So I think it's the background we share, the refugee blood, if you will, which compelled me and also compelled Abhishek to be in this journey with me.
Hmm. But then, talking about refugee blood, I come from Haryana, and Haryana, right after partition, was part of then divided Punjab. Uh, दो जगह से देश का विभाजन हुआ. One was the Punjab side, and then there was a Bengal side. And there's another idea na, that I think Sanjeev sir or also many other people talk about, and it was being discussed during the book launch. कि कैसे एक तरफ there was a झटका kind of a thing, and then
Yeah, it happened like in one go,
and then
which is the western side.
Which is the western side, and then on the other side there's halal type. Why don't you talk about it? Okay, 47. What's been the impact of 47?
So 47 में more or less इस तरफ का जो होना था हो गया था, the western side, and huge mass of people, and the violence and the rapes and all of that, homelessness, leaving everything behind to move from this way to that way to this way. But the interesting thing about the partition on the east is, and not too many people talk about it, that it did not end in 47. Waves of migration kept happening till very late, till 71 and after, and it's still happening in a sense. People come from that side to this side, because the violence never really stopped, and the othering never really stopped, and the othering continues. Now, one of the reasons for that to happen was the sense of caste. So there was this very tall leader, Jogendranath Mondal, who rejected Nehru-Gandhi's Congress for Jinnah's Muslim League, because he was of the belief that the landed gentry in that side of the border were the oppressors, and the Dalit Hindu and the Muslim were both his victims. Okay, so he told his fellow men that आप लोग रह जाइए, because we are not, the Muslim is not our enemy. So we will have we'll have this large mass of scheduled caste Hindu population along with the Muslims, and we'll have this new country. And he was the first law and labor minister of independent Pakistan. So which is amazing. And today you don't even find his name in history. I mean, if you Google, there's a Wikipedia page on him. There's also books written on him. But the point is, how many people know this?
Right.
That the first law and labor minister of independent Pakistan was a Bengali Dalit Hindu from that side of the border. So, but what happened was he realized that the dream had fallen through. Okay, so I mean, soon after the partition, the Dalit Hindu became just a Hindu. Okay, and the violence started again for property, over petty squabbles, and he wrote letters to his bosses in the western side of Pakistan, and nothing happened. So he came to West Bengal, a very dejected man, and he tried to.
When did he come around?
I think, if I'm not wrong, around 51, I'd say.
In fact, you reproduced that picture.
Yes, I have a picture of his house where he came and stayed. It's opposite a very glittering mall in South Kolkata, the South City Mall. Yeah. Oh. So people won't recognize this house or the lane even, but on the other side, almost on the other side, is a very glittering mall. It's one of the biggest mall in Kolkata.
Who would imagine?
Yeah, would imagine. And he came and he tried to do politics here. Yes. Sort of, revive the entire Dalit movement. But then he did not find much success, and he died unsung. And while the people he had, he was a leader of the Bengali Hindu Dalits, most of them stayed back and faced what they faced, and still facing what they're facing. So interestingly, one of the young Bangladeshi Hindu rights activists I spoke to in the book, and I've spoken to him. This may not be the view of everybody, but he calls him a villain.
Mandal.
He calls Mandal a villain. This guy, Jayanta Kormukar, he said, what did he do? He got it all wrong. And because of him, so many people were left behind while he escaped.
So the tragedy.
Yes, the tragedy of, a wrong call.
A wrong call.
Yeah.
Much like a wrong call, and the coming generations suffer the consequences.
Yes.
But there's another interesting thing about Mandal, which pertains to the first Law Minister of India.
Yes.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Yes.
And I think that's the same story, right? It was Ambedkar was not getting or did not get.
Yes. So it was in fact Mandal's support that sent Ambedkar to Parliament. But the point is that nobody really in all of this looked at the East. The East was gloriously ignored.
But was it ignored? Brings us to the question, because people on the western side, at least Punjab के अंदर जो violence 47 में हुई थी, and उसके consequences आपको हरियाणा में आज भी दिखते हैं, because there was a large Punjabi migrant population which settled in कुरुक्षेत्र for that matter उस टाइम पर सबसे बड़ा refugee camp बना था, and it ended up close to 4 times जो उसकी capacity थी जो पहले imagine किया गया था. And then of course people moved to other cities, Yamunanagar, Sonipat, Panipat, and then Delhi also. And those memories are still fresh. Because people are दादी नानियों की कहानियों के अंदर आपको वो किस्से सुनने को मिलते हैं और बड़े दर्दनाक किस्से हैं. In fact, I was telling somebody कि there are such painful memories ना कि generations ने कोशिश की है कि उसके बारे में बात ही नहीं हो. And it is perhaps now that we are talking about it. So ऐसा नहीं है कि West ने suffer नहीं किया, but East में what was happening is, and it's commonly said कि what was Gandhi's impact.
Gandhi went to Noakhali in 1946. I also went to Noakhali in 2023, 2022 also. And there's this very funny story of Gandhi going to Noakhali and exhorting the population to stop the rioting and the killing. There was no rioting, there was one-way massacre. The Muslims were killing people, the Hindus in Noakhali, forcing them to convert, raping their women. But the story Noakhali remembers today, and which I heard in 2022 when I went to Gandhi Ashram, and of all places I heard the story in Gandhi Ashram, that Gandhi jab Noakhali mein aaye the, he had a goat with him because he had this habit of drinking goat's milk. And while he was in Noakhali, the goat got stolen. So the story of the lost goat, and this story I heard inside Gandhi Ashram. Nobody knows what happened to the goat. What people do remember is how his appeal fell on deaf ears because the massacre didn't stop. And in fact, my co-author Abhishek's family was in Noakhali in 1946 when this was happening. They barely managed to escape. And his grandmother, who I met, who unfortunately is no more, this book is dedicated to her. She was inside a school building with her family, trying to escape the murderous mob. Okay. And there's this instance that I quote in the book, that she had a younger sister who did not know what was happening. Okay, why are they hiding inside a cramped room? So many people together. And she started crying. So her father put a hand on her mouth to stop the crying, because the crying would because bahar se lag raha tha ki andar koi hai nahi, but if there's a child crying, then the mob would get inside. But she would just not stop crying. So somebody said that should you kill the child to save all of us? So when I was talking to Smriti Kona Biswas, Abhishek's grandmother, I did not have the heart to ask her, did your father kill your sister, or was she alive? Because how do you ask a question like that to a woman who's almost 90 years old and her memory is failing her? But it was that bad, literally, and they survived that. So the fact that Gandhi's peace talk did not achieve much, I saw it in the eyes of Smriti Kona Biswas, my co-author's grandmother, because she lived that reality in 1946 in Noakhali.
So, of course, so then from 47 to 1971, the dream of a Hindus surviving in Pakistan, the Hindus surviving in what now is East Pakistan, and then of course Bangladesh. How was it taking shape, and what was unfolding? We of course know, okay, Bangladesh became a separate country in time, but that span of say close to 25 years, what was happening in those years in Bangladesh, or what now is Bangladesh?
S- See, there was a sense of the Bengali identity becoming bigger than the religious identity, more than the religious identity, especially when West Pakistan started giving East Pakistan very stepmotherly treatment.
Mhm.
So the language, the love for the language, even today, I'd say in Bangladesh, that sentiment is there, the language sentiment. They're very proud of their language. So Urdu is almost the language of the oppressor, even
Okay.
today, because there is memory still, and maybe not today's kids because they won't remember what happened. Perhaps they have to read it in history books. But even today, the sense of Urdu does not bring a smile. It brings anger, because that was the language of the oppressor, West Pakistan, who wanted that to be the main language of East Pakistan. Okay, so, and they didn't want to give it up. So around the debate over the language, the religious divide somehow for a small while was pushed. I won't say was completely, there was no sense of it, but got pushed back,
Okay.
because both the East Pakistani Hindu, the
Mhm.
Bengali Hindu,
Mhm.
and the Bengali Muslim
Mhm.
wanted to retain the common language Bengali and the common culture and the common way of life, as opposed to thousands of miles away, somebody telling them how to be.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that what we loosely call syncretic culture, and it's also debated. People say that don't extrapolate. I mean, but there was some sense of a common identity that came,
Mhm.
and you will even read it in the speeches of Sheikh Mujib.
Mhm.
There's a famous quote of his that's there in uh, the visa office, Salt Lake visa office, in Calcutta, which says that this country does not belong to Hindus, this country does not belong to Muslims, this country belongs to anybody who wants to call it home. So there was this sense of Bangladesh belonging to the Bengali, not really the Bengali Hindu or the Bengali Muslim. And that got reinforced when the West Pakistani army, or rather the Pakistani army, came with the murderous intent of pushing down Bengali culture.
No, so but was it happening in a phase, or did it begin right after 47?
There, I think right after 47, from 47 to 71, if you're asking. So I think till then there was, see, I mean, the Muslim identity, of course, was there. I mean, the Sheikh Mujib himself and the other Surawardi, for instance, who's a hero in Bangladesh, is not a hero in West Bengal, because the great Calcutta killings happened, and many blame him for orchestrating it. But I think there was still a sense of the Bengali identity, and there was still a sense that keeping the syncretic culture alive. I'll tell you, 47 is too long back, but I think when I used to go to Bangladesh during the 80s, when I was a kid with my father, because he would often go there as a visiting lecturer, I saw that I saw that Dhaka. I did not really travel outside Dhaka, but Dhaka was a very cosmopolitan city.
This is what time we're talking about?
This is the 80s, 1980s.
1980s.
Yeah,
It's a very
1980.
cosmopolitan. But 40s to 47 to say 71, other than what you speak about,
Yes.
70s ke andar, when the partition became,
Yes.
when
When the
independence,
War of Independence, yes.
took shape. Us time tak were Hindus being targeted and killed?
They were, but because the waves of migration, like I said, did not stop. For instance, this whole first book I wrote, Blood Island Marichapi massacre. So these guys also came in the intervening periods, no? So it's not as if it was all hunky dory. No, but there was still so I think parallelly these things existed. There were attacks on Hindus. There was also an attempt at a syncretic Bengali culture, which is over and beyond the religious identity.
Post 47, the Hindu minority in East Pakistan stayed at the crosshairs for the longest
stayed at the
time.
crosshairs because waves of migration kept happening.
So people were moving into India, but at
Into
the
India.
same time, there were also Hindus who were
Yes.
compelled to move because they were being
Yes.
targeted and
In fact, so many people moved
Mhm.
to India after 47 that the West Bengal government could not contain them in one space. So they were sent to this area called Dandakaranya, the mythical Dandakaranya, where refugee camps were set up. I visited the Mana camp. It's still called Mana camp, outside Raipur airport.
Okay.
So that area is called Mana camp. There are pakka houses now. It's like a proper colony. At that time, they were like this little camps.
Much like how it was happening in the Punjab and the Haryana side.
And those guys then went to Sundarbans and Marichapi, and 78, 79 happened.
Yes.
So they did not come during 47, right? They came in the intervening period of 47 and 71. So it's not as if everything was honky-dory. It wasn't. There were riots that were taking place. Not maybe huge riots necessarily all the time, but there were these bursts of violence that would take place.
So targeted killings and ethnic cleansing was taking shape, but it was not like we spoke about. It was not.
See, ethnic cleansing, I won't use the word for that phase, because ethnic cleansing, actually what ethnic cleansing is, happened in 71 when there was selective genocide. So
talk a bit about it, because 71 is a critical year. Something was going on in India. The war, recently the movie also came out.
Yes.
A lot was taking shape, and we Indians remember 71 for other reasons.
Yes.
But something rather horrific was
so the West Pakistani army wanted to take away any trace of the Bengali identity that I'm talking about, right? The language. So it was over language, right? Urdu over Bengali, and the culture, no Ravindra Sangeet. In wanting to do that, what did they want to take away from the East Pakistani sense of being? It was also the Hindu identity. So yes, the Muslims suffered. A lot of Muslims suffered. Muslim women were raped along with Hindu women. But I think there was this word that was used still there, and that continues to be used in academic circles, called selective genocide. The indignity, the rape, the murder that was heaped on the Hindu population of East Pakistan was unbearable. There's something. This is beyond comprehension. So that was ethnic cleansing, where you wanted to literally want to take blood out with a syringe. So you wanted to take the sense of Hinduness out from Bengali Hinduness from East Pakistan out with a syringe. That there would be nothing left, and whoever stays back as a Hindu there is a converted person, has to become Muslim. I think this is also there in Taslima Nasrin's Lajja and several other books. But that was ethnic cleansing in the true sense.
So what are the figures that we're talking about?
Millions. I mean, there can be no number. There are of course numbers that are thrown about, but
3 million.
3 million, etc. But it was crazy, and they're called Birangana. There were rape camps. There were proper rape camps in set up in East Pakistan, which is today Bangladesh, where women, in fact, there's this film. It didn't do too well for obvious reasons, but I'm forgetting the name. I think it'll come to me, on what happened in East Pakistan at that time. And I met the director of the film, and he told me that while doing his research, there were several types of rape that used to happen. There were demarcation of rapes, how the Pakistani army officer will rape a Hindu woman and how they will rape a Muslim woman. So even the rapes were distinguished. And he said, because it took him months to sort of, to talk to a rape survivor and somebody who's now in their later stages of their years to remember something so horrific. But he said that there were Hindu women and Muslim women were divided by the way they would be raped by the Pakistanis.
But what are the broad numbers that we're talking about? Because I want to get a clear sense of, was it because, of course, we know the Bengali
identity. And thousands of women were raped.
No, in terms of Hindu identity, because it was targeted, and you spoke about there were Hindu women and there were Muslim women, and segregation also. Kis tarah se rape or assault hona. But I want to understand, are we really talking about, or what are the numbers that we're talking about? Because their faith is Hindu, because their practices and their culture is Hindu, they are being systemically targeted. And surprisingly, people know little about it.
I think in Bangladesh you'd still find literature even today and over the years on this sense, because in the Bangladeshi psyche, 71 is still strong. They just did a film called Mujib, The Making of a Nation. Even in that they showed. But what I'm telling you, that this selective genocide, or the difference in which a woman is raped depending on her religious identity, is not something that is really talked about so openly. I think this because you have this sense of collective pain, which there was. I mean, it would be wrong to deny that the Muslim population in East Pakistan did not face the brunt. It did, but
how? Sorry for saying so.
Yeah.
But what is the proportion that we're talking about? Because I'm trying to find was faith a driving factor, or
Yes,
was
faith was
culture a driving factor?
Faith, culture was a driving factor. Let me put it this way: culture was a driving factor. On your face, it was something on your face that this is a culture that has to be pushed back, and this culture has to come in. But like I said, it was based on faith. And the Bengali Hindu was looked at as somebody who's diluting the Bengali Muslim by mixing his culture into the Islamic culture.
And so systemically, Hindu women were targeted.
Systematically, Hindu women were targeted. Rabindranath's songs were not being allowed to play. Anything to do, Bengali language was seen as a language of a problematic language, which allowed this kind of syncretism to sustain itself. So the Hindu was almost at the focal point of the genocide.
So what perhaps is spoken about the Jewish Holocaust, something was unfolding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very close parallel.
Rather tragic. But then, so I understand now that you're talking about this. 71 was a critical moment in the face of India, Bangladesh, and Bangladeshi history also. The country found independence, new structures were put in place. Was the idea of secular state also put in place then?
There was a sense of a secularism that was put in place. Of course, when you suffer something so tragic and so devastating together, it is supposed to bring the two of you together. But what is interesting is that Jamaat, though was banned soon after, Jamaat continued to operate in Bangladesh. Okay, and continues to operate in Bangladesh. Jamaat is a political party, though this time they can't participate in the polls. The Supreme Court has barred it from participating in the polls, but it was in power in Bangladesh's independent Bangladesh's history. And this is the same Jamaat which did not agree to the idea of a Bangladesh in the first place. So those forces that we are talking about never left East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh. So even in independent Bangladesh, forces, see the irony, even in independent Bangladesh, forces that did not want Bangladesh to be birthed remained.
And in fact, rather probing you into it, was Jamaat playing an important factor in all these tragedies that were unfolding?
Oh, absolutely. It played a. In fact, in October, there were protests out on the street where the Jamaat openly said that enough of man-made laws, it wants Sharia law in Bangladesh. I was writing an article for the print today. I wrote about this. That this is that on one side there is a vision of smart Bangladesh, which is Sheikh Hasina's aim, by 2041. Technologically, infrastructurally, society, it has to be a smart country.
And on the other
hand, on the other hand, there is Sharia law. So it's the choices between smart Bangladesh and Sharia law, and it's just that they're not even hiding it. They've come out and they've said that we want Sharia law, we don't want man-made laws anymore.
But what was India's response to it? Because Indira Gandhi was well in power then. A year later, in 71, we were talking when she made a good hoo-ha, got a good public image boost also. But how did it unfold? What was India's reaction?
See, I mean, we keep talking about it, but I mean, even today, but you have to understand, Bangladesh, after all, is a sovereign country. I mean, in India, there may be a sense of India because India helped Bangladesh, East Pakistan become Bangladesh, the military support it gave. But it's still a sovereign country. It can keep a look at what's happening in Bangladeshi society. But a sovereign country will manage its own affairs. Like, for instance, you have a very friendly government in Bangladesh. It's often talked about in G20. The photo ops were very good. Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Hasina, her daughter meeting Biden, And all of this is, and there's of course strategic partnership, and our Prime Minister shares a very cordial, almost friendly relationship
But
with
this is
Hasina.
now. But what was unfolding in 70s?
70s
Because
also.
Simla
No,
Pact
so I was telling you that, so on the face of it, everything is state to state, everything is right. But why did I need to write this book? Because if you delve deeper, if you actually go out, you will see that there are still instances of othering. There is still attacks on Hindu temples. 2021, which saw almost nationwide anti-Hindu riots over a fake news, is now. So the two leaders being close to each other, the states talking to each other, does not really often translate into how society operates. So even though, like I said, so even though 71, there was this sense of, India helping Bangladesh for its gain independence, Jamaat remained. Right. So on the ground, what is happening is anybody's guess, because they were inimical to the idea of Bangladesh. They were inimical to the idea of Hinduness.
But I think I read somewhere that Shimla Pact ke andar, the perpetrators of all these crimes, which is also the Pakistani army officers, they were, the crimes were sort of written off. There's something like that.
Not written off. I mean, the War Crimes Tribunal in fact, punished war criminals in Bangladesh, but there was a huge brouhaha in Bangladeshi society over that, because a large chunk of Bangladeshi society is also believes in the idea of the Jamaat. Okay, so you can't.
It's clearly Hindu versus Muslim.
It is clearly Hindu versus Muslim.
So
but interestingly, I have friends in Dhaka who tell me that if the idea that Sheikh Hasina wants to put out goes, like we were discussing at the book launch, it's not after Hasina who necessarily, it's after Hasina what. So if the sense of Bangladesh that Hasina puts on the table goes, it is some of my friends in Dhaka tell me, Muslim friends, that it's not just the Hindu who's Hindu khatre mein hai, it's also the Muslim who doesn't necessarily adhere to what the Jamaat is saying, or to what radical forces are saying, that would be affected.
How big would that population be?
That would not be perhaps a very significant chunk. It's very difficult to say, Arjun, because how do you on the face of it, people are a certain way, but can you really say what they're thinking inside?
No, so but when people come to be divided in terms of
I'll tell you this.
No, hear me out of this.
Huh.
So when it comes to this, that people are divided in the name of faith, would a liberal Muslim side with a Hindu, or is that liberal Muslim, again, for the viewers, also an oxymoron, but is that one, liberal Muslim and an oxymoron? Two, would that liberal Muslim side with the majority Muslim believers or with the Hindu? In terms of when it comes to a sectarian, when it comes to a faith related conflict, because that is exactly what happened in 47. That is exactly what happened in 1971.
But I can tell you what I saw in the 2 years that I have been going to Bangladesh. What I saw is not just in Dhaka, but even in the hinterlands of Bangladesh. There are instances even during the 2021 anti-Hindu riots where Hindus were saved by neighboring Muslims. Right? I went to the Mukta Shah I spoke about, whose brother was killed.
Yes.
Next to her house, there was a local army league leader who parted his hair to show me a deep gash, and he almost died. He was in hospital for several months. He's a very small time local leader. Okay, he tried to stop he's a Muslim. He tried to stop the mob from entering their house, and they hit him on the head with a sharp object, and he lost consciousness, lost blood, and almost died. So there are instances of, you remember the debate that happened when I said this, the launch, that there are instances of village Muslims rebuilding temples that have been washed away by floods, or historical place, and then it's to be a bigger temple. So people are pulling in money to build that temple. In fact, one of my friends, Salahuddin Suman, he's one of the biggest YouTubers. He regularly gets a lot of hate. You should check out his videos. There are subtitles below. One of the things he does videos on history, heritage, and those are like wonderful things to look at and to learn from. He does videos on Hindu heritage in Bangladesh.
No, but I don't.
So what you are saying, that your specific question, the liberal Muslim would side with the Hindu or sort of side with the co-religionist.
And is there the first question was, is there a liberal Muslim in Bangladesh?
There is. There is. Percentage may not, I mean, there's no way to tell you a percentage.
But a ballpark, 50% would be liberal Muslims. Or,
no, I can't tell. I will tell you. I'll answer from this to you from a different story. I did a story on Daka Elites. Okay, this was not a Hindu-Muslim thing. This is just elitism versus conservatism. So I spoke to a guy who's Muslim but who's gay. Okay, I spoke to a.
Is it a Muslim guy?
He's a Muslim guy.
A Muslim guy in Dhaka.
In Dhaka, who's gay.
Okay.
He's a gay rights activist. He's a gay guy, and he
has he received death threats?
He has. And I spoke to a lady who's Muslim and who's a model. And she has dressed up as Krishna. One of the photo shoots she did, she dressed up as, she's dark skinned. She has dressed up as Krishna and done a photo shoot, which she had put out on Facebook. And she received threats. So she took that photo off, I think, from Facebook. But
these threats, to be specific, are death threats, rape threats?
Both. So I asked this guy, to answer your question, I asked this guy, what is the percentage of this elite slash liberal slash population in Dhaka? He said less than 2%.
And one could only imagine what it would be in all of Bangladesh, where systems and society changes very quickly. So second you cross the urban areas. Okay, very tragic. But then, of course, let's bring us back on what. So since 71, like you just said, about a wave of migration was happening. Refugees were entering the country, and of course, the left front government. The entire massacre that your first book is on. Isn't that a tragedy? How India was responding, or how the government was responding to Hindu refugees who were coming in, or perhaps to seek some sort of solace in a country which is the center or the hub of dharmic faith?
It's a tragedy of epic proportions, because firstly, Nehru did not want so many Hindu refugees coming from East Pakistan into India. Okay, and Bidhan Chandra Roy, Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy, who was Chief Minister of West Bengal, he wrote frantic letters to Nehru saying that, these people have nowhere to go. We have to let them be. And West Bengal, of course, could not contain so many people who were coming in from that side to this. So this whole entire Dandakarana area was set up. And very interestingly, the left front, which was in the opposition at that time, objected to the movement of Hindu refugees from West Bengal to Dandakaranya. They in fact said that you guys are Bengalis and you speak our language, you have our culture, so why are you being sent to this godforsaken land where there's nothing? You don't know the language, you don't know the culture. Many of you are fishermen, there are no rivers there. So what will you do there? When we come to power, we will bring you back. Okay, and there were many of the left leaders were extremely popular with the refugees who were Bengali Hindu refugees who were sent to Dandakaranya, and that's what they remembered for decades, right? And even there's this theory that it was a left leader who took a band of refugees to Sundarbans and earmarked the island Marijhapi, where later the great tragedy would take place. So, ironically, when the left came to power, they forgot all about their promises. Okay, and delegations went to meet Jyoti Basu, who became the chief minister. They were ignored. They said, "But you in opposition promised us to promise that we would be accommodated." Please remember that decades have passed since then, and they have by that time settled in Dandakaranya. So makeshift refugee camps had become pakka houses, or they have had a livelihood. They have also saved money. But their heart was in Bengal, because they thought that if we had left East Bengal, which became East Pakistan and now is Bangladesh, at least we will be in West Bengal, where the language is the same, where the culture is the same. Okay, the land is fertile, there's fish in the river, and we can do what our traditional livelihoods were. But the left did not accommodate them. And this band of refugees, sometime in 77, 78, they started moving from Dandakaranya with the money they had saved, their lifetime's earnings. And lifetime's earnings, after losing their lifetime earning in East Bengal, they started moving towards this island called Marijhapi on their own. They were stopped at various points by the West Bengal police, but they somehow managed to reach that island. Something unimaginable took place. And my father was a young professor at that time, and he was. I talk about it briefly in Blood Island. He was extremely involved in that whole movement that was taking place. Not just my father, intellectuals, writers, poets of West Bengal, they were fascinated by this idea that a large mass of people can move from who have already been displaced, can move to an island with their own money and clear the island of shrubs and build a township. Imagine, this is 78, and within 6 months, uninhabited village became a full-fledged township. There was a school, there were lanes, lanes were demarcated where huts were in order. And there was a bidi factory, there was a boat building factory, there was a school that was set up, there was a tube well that was dug up. And all of these things happened within 6 to 8 months, right? And then the West Bengal government did what they did to these refugees.
And then the Nehruvian Gandhian legacy
Yeah.
was quiet about it.
Sorry, I mean, I remember in my 2019 when Blood Island came out, Sanjeev Sanyal was there at the launch, and he said that every time he wanted to speak about Morijhapi, he would be shouted down from members of the audience. Right, Mr. Bibek Devroy was there, and he said that it's not just about the left front government, it's about the Bengali identity, that what kind of people are we, that we did not talk about this. The massacre of thousands of people in our own backyard by our government, state government.
So naturally, Hindus.
Yes.
Because these are Hindu refugees.
All of them are Hindu refugees, yes. And mostly lower caste, but they were not all of them.
No, regardless, I think which is why it's important, because of late we've had these discussions, you and I, we've had private conversations on what is the role of jati and how people or how Hindus should evolve into a larger and look at each other as more as Hindus, because they're perhaps nowhere else to go.
Yes.
See what is unfolding in Israel, vis-a-vis conflict. Across the world, there's something happening, and there's academic institutions are rallies against what Israel is doing. But then there's a small country which is the only state for Jews now, and same thing is unfolding in India as well. क्योंकि देश आजाद हुआ है, हिंदुओं के पास और कोई जगह नहीं है. Hindus would naturally converge towards the state. But what is the state doing? The state is actually the left government.
Examples. But I tell you this, Arjun, whichever side of the political divide you are on, you may have differing ideas. But the state coming down on people who had nowhere to go and Morijhapi is perhaps the biggest massacre purely in terms of numbers. We do a lot of data journalism, so purely in terms of numbers, it's perhaps the biggest massacre in independent India. And it was and the bigger tragedy, if I may, was that people don't talk about it. And it's like it's almost as if it didn't happen.
But is it because of the left control over academia and history writing?
There is no other way to explain this. On this, I have to fully sort of go with you. And there it is just that.
I mean, someday somebody will have to document the story of tragedies that the left academia or left.
There have been books. They have gone out of publication. There, people say Blood Island was the first book on this tragedy. There were other books written on Morijhapi in Bengali by people who had first-hand knowledge of what's happening. At least they spoke to survivors and they sort of theorized on what's happening. Those books magically disappeared from the market.
Which is why I think we began the conversation now. किन उन मुद्दों के बारे में फाइनली बात हो रही है, बात क्या किताबें आ रही हैं जिनके बारे में पहले कोई इमेजिन भी नहीं कर सकता था कि इस तरह से.
I keep saying there's a caste system of truth in India. There are some truths which are easy to talk about in sort of in very cultured circles, in elite societies, among the champagne sipping crowd. And there are some truths, even if you begin to talk about them, you are somehow shut out. Books are not written. If they are written, they are not promoted, and it continues well into today. I mean, even now, if you see how much weightage is given to something like this book, I mean, thanks to you doing this with me. But if this book had come out say 10 years ago, I don't think it would have found any audience or any kind of
or
traction.
even publisher, I think, for that matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Kyunki ye, when I say this, it reminds me of a conversation I was having with a relative of mine, and we were sitting in, imagining that Delhi ke jo ye elites hain, and I did not want to go there, but the conversation compels me कि कितना टफ हुआ करता था इन सारे मुद्दों के बारे में बात करना. And only recently, I think I was speaking with a relative who said कि I found myself, he said that he found himself in absolute shock the second he began thinking about what happened to the minorities, to the Hindus who were left in Pakistan, the minorities who were left in Bangladesh. And he was coming to a close figure. Only a handful of them left.
Yeah.
And he was, conveniently comparing it with or what happened to the Muslims in India.
Yeah.
And you see a stark contrast.
Yeah.
And in that scenario, let's just bring around to what is happening, what is unfolding in India, what is unfolding in Bangladesh today. Post 2014, do you think there's been a significant change? At least one, we clearly know that there are conversations happening. Two, we know that Hindu civilization state is finally asserting itself in some way or the other. We know that Indian civilization or Indian state is becoming economically and consequently also geopolitically powerful. We have sort of established ourselves as a regional power. Be it on all global platforms, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has projected an image of India which is assertive, which is a doer, and the state which is perhaps ready to take the leadership beyond the leader of Global South. What has unfolded in India since 2014 vis-a-vis Bangladesh and the state of Hindu refugees?
Okay, loaded this thing. I personally feel that, like I was saying, that there's the idea of a smart Bangladesh or there's Sharia law. So the Modi government shares a very cordial relationship, a strategic partnership with the Sheikh Hasina government. I think Sheikh Hasina's stated aim to have, in fact, the party's slogan is religion is personal, but festivity is for everybody. Even today, I attended 2 Durga Pujas in the course of this book, this year and last year. There is a lot of, positivity around Durga Puja. And there are the huge number of Durga Pujas that take place, not just in Dhaka, across Bangladesh. Okay. What you cannot also miss is the security presence on the ground during the 4 days. So this is also Sheikh Hasina government throwing its entire might to make sense of the puja to a larger population, so that has changed. So if it's a truce in society, it's a forced truce. This is, again, you'd say that what is a percentage, but I think there are many Muslims who would still go to a Durga Puja pandal, okay, not just in the city, in the villages. But is a larger chunk of the population gradually turning away from something like Durga Puja? Yes.
So only a handful of Hindus are holding the fort right now.
Only a handful of Muslims.
Hindus, Bengali Hindus who are holding the fort.
Holding the fort. No, Hindus. How are the Hindus in Bangladesh? Now, how do I answer this question? There are Hindus who are in the military, very senior army officers. There are Hindus who are in the police.
What was the population?
Population, like Sanjeev was saying, the population, of course, tells you a very different, give you a very different stat because it's sharply declining. But it's less than, it's hugely less than what it was supposed to be. I won't go into numbers because numbers are confusing and numbers are also sometimes not correct in terms of how much is officially told and how much is there on the ground.
So we can clearly say that there's been a steep decline in numbers.
Steep decline in numbers over the years, but there is...
And another steep decline in practicing Hindus.
No, not steep decline in practicing Hindus is not I mean, the Hindus who are there practice their faith. Okay. But is there a fear? Yes, there is.
But since 47, the number has declined clearly.
Huge.
Since 71, the number has declined.
Hugely.
Okay. So what's been the impact of CAA then? Because Prime Minister Narendra Modi brought the CAA, and it was
The
believed to correct
protests.
an anomaly. How do you see that?
Like I said, until Hasina is there, I think there is hope. Post Hasina, this conversation, in fact, before her, this conversation needs to come back to the table.
So, but is the conversation going to come back to, or is the conversation to a conclusion, or are you saying that after Sheikh Hasina goes, there's nothing that perhaps is?
I think Sheikh Hasina needs to, the Army League needs to find a successor who will carry forward what she today stands for.
But what
whether it's really, within the family or outside.
No, what does she really stand for? Because I understand the political lessons or political points, but we are also arguing, or at least you've argued since 1971, and we come to a conclusion and converge to that conclusion कि numbers उस time पर भी decline हुए हैं. So Sheikh Hasina के बाद मतलब वो what you're saying is कि हालात बदतर थे और वो बहुत ज़्यादा और बदतर हो जाएंगे if Sheikh Hasina goes, am I putting it correctly?
Yeah, if Sheikh Hasina is no longer in power, let's put it this way.
Okay, but then what unfolded in 2021? Could you?
That's a very interesting question, and also a loaded question. What unfolded in 2021 is exactly what the fear is. That if you turn the other way even a little bit, this is what's going to come up. So what happened in 2021? A copy of the Quran was found at the feet of a statue of Lord Hanuman at a temple, at a pandal. Okay. And this news went viral. And anti-Hindu riots started taking place across Bangladesh. One village across Bangladesh. Like there was this communal flare-up. Okay. Later, it was 4 Hindus officially lost their lives. Huge property damage. Pandals were ransacked. Mukta Shaha, who we spoke about, her brother was killed in front of her eyes. A 10-year-old son saw it happening. Next door to her, there's an ISKCON temple where a Hindu man was butchered and his body was thrown into a well. Officially, they say 4.
Officially, they say just 4.
Just 4. Lost their lives, but of course there was violence, and there were like extreme violence and grave physical grave attacks on Hindus and on their property and on their religious places. But officially the figure is 4 or 5. That's the number. But the riot spread, okay, and the police of course came in. But there's a question that why did the riot spread? It could happen at this one juncture where where it actually, from where the news spread. But when you're hearing news of it spreading from one village to another, one district to the next, could there not have been a clampdown? Right? That's the debate. So even if you look the other way slightly, there's always a chance of this happening. And so which is why I which is why I decided to write the book in the first place. 2021, looking at what was happening in Bangladesh, sitting in the Noida newsroom and getting those stories out. That's when I thought that, okay, there is, on the face of it, great camaraderie between, 2 prime ministers. But what's happening in the society?
And what was the role of social media? Where do you see this heading? Because बहुत सारी चीजें हो रही हैं. We get a sense of how there are existing fissures in the society, which are the reason behind that, those fissures, or the pillar behind that is faith.
Yeah.
तो धर्म के नाम पर लोग divided हैं, and faith के basis पे violence भी हो रहा है. There is no way anybody could stop the violence. Sheikh Hasina is trying. You would argue that she's trying hard, but there is no possibility after her.
It definitely looks very grim after her, unless she has somebody replacing her or somebody coming after her who's equally committed.
Because in 2024 we are going to polls.
Yes, 7 January. Mm-hmm. So say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I mean she's also 76. I mean after she is no longer in the chair, I mean whoever succeeds her has to have the same level of commitment to keep the Hindus in Bangladesh.
But do you believe that, or do you see that the forces of Islamism are gaining ground over?
I think the straight answer. I think the forces of Islamism are gaining ground.
And there's also a quote in the book from Dr. Abul Barkat.
Yes, that got us into trouble at the book launch. Yes, but that's a Bangladeshi professor saying it. I mean, who am I to
talk a bit about it?
this came out. He has been quoted in several places. I mean, this is used as a reference to argue for the CA. This is a reference to argue that there is no hope. There's only gloom and doom for Hindus in Bangladesh. Uh, and after all, he's a Muslim professor in Bangladesh saying it, who understands
What
the
is
society. He says that there will be no Hindus left in Bangladesh 30 years down the line.
So a review what an article quotes. So here's the forecast. 30 years from now, no Hindus will be left in Bangladesh should the current rate of exodus continue. The rate of exodus over the past 49 years points in that direction, predicts Dr. Abul Barkat, a Dhaka University professor. On an average, as of 2016, 632 people from the minority community leave the country each day. And this is what you write in the book.
Yes.
So
this is him. We are just quoting him. This got me into a bit of an argument with my Bangladeshi friends. I mean, I've got to know a lot of people over Hindus, Muslims, both over the period of time I have spent there. But I mean, who's to say, Arjun? I mean, how can you say these things? 30 years, it can be 20 years, it can be 50 years, it can never be. One can only hope it will never
5
be.
5 years, however the situation unfolds, because little is known about it.
Yes.
But we'll bring you the pointers also, or the factual information from our friend's book also, because it's particularly important. And I think I'll bring the snapshot in the post credits also. Okay? What is the number of Hindus in 47 in Bangladesh?
Yeah.
What is the number in 71?
Yes.
Where it lies today. But yes, of course, thank you for bringing this story out. Only seldom do you get to see these conversations happening. We've spoken about it during our podcast, and it's not just a topic sort of कि ऐसा मुद्दा नहीं है कि जो बड़ा एलियन हो, मतलब मैं हनुमान भक्त हूँ, तो that temple in Noakhali is something that I can perhaps relate to. But then, of course, I'm glad that you wrote this book. I'm glad that these conversations are happening. I'm glad that there's a prime minister in his place who does consider his faith as a priority in civilization and state and in these conversations. Before we wrap this conversation, where do you see Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the midst of all of this?
I think, like you said, I agree with you there. The sense of the Prime Minister, the sense that he brings to the table, especially in the Indian subcontinent, is very pertinent here. Because I think there is a sense of Hinduness that is put out. Mm-hmm. And that also that works both ways. Okay, even Hasina is attacked. I've heard those attacks. I've heard anti-Hasina slogans, which say that I'll quote the most popular one for you. Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Sheikh Hasina Bapen Nam. As in Hare Krishna, Hare Ram is Sheikh Hasina's father's name. Mm-hmm. So her closeness to Mr. Modi also makes her vulnerable to that part of the population that is against the idea of India, the idea of Hinduness.
The polar Islamic front, which is the opposite side, which does not want her in power.
Yes. So somewhere she is standing against complete darkness and hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And I think Prime Minister Modi is doing a stellar job in sort of aiding her to do so, if I may.
So, because this is what I wanted to explore also during multiple instances during our conversation. In 2014 having a prime minister who wears his Hindu faith on his sleeve is very, it gives a sense of confidence to Hindus across the world. Yeah. And I've heard these stories from Hindus who are working in Ukraine, Hindus who've been in London, Hindus who've been in the US, and Hindus who are perhaps, as your book suggests, those are whom that, they look up to India as India is the state where the faith evolved, where Sanatan Dharma evolved. And when people across the world, Hindus across the world, flourish or they are in trouble, they look forward to a state to look forward towards the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, क्योंकि वो एक आस जो जगी है faith के अंदर वो finally आने लगी है. Would you second that?
Yes. I'd want to say one thing in conclusion, that I think we go to see Hindu civilizational stamps in Nepal, which is hugely Hindu.
Which has also become a secular state now.
Yes.
India became a secular state as well.
Yes, which we go to see Hindu civilization on stamp in Thailand, for instance. We should visit Bangladesh in more numbers. There are amazing temples that go back in time. They're still there. I think one of the things that perhaps the two governments can do is encourage religious tourism more.
Mm-hmm.
It will boost their local economy, not just the big temples in Dhaka, smaller temples that go back way back in time, great historical significance. If Indian tourists go and visit those places, the local economy will boost, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And thereby, economics may push back radicalism.
All right. With that, I think we'll wrap up this conversation. Thank you, Deep.
Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, Deep
so
and
much.
Abhishek, for writing this book.
Yes.
And congratulations. I wish you
Thank you.
success.
Thank you.